So as you all know, thanks to my ability to speak Spanish, I have taken a few trips to Spanish-speaking countries. I've gone, before I was not a native Spanish speaker, before I was a Spanish speaker, I went to Mexico and Puerto Rico, but I did the traditionally touristy things there when I went to those two countries. Stayed in tourist zones, stayed at resorts. So I don't consider those, real travel experiences. They were, but they're more so hedonistic travel experiences versus cultural exchanges, if that makes any sense. As an adult, I've gone to Peru and Colombia, and there were some crazy things that happened, entre comillas, crazy things that happened that made me realize that when you're traveling to a foreign country, it is very important that you speak the language. And so in this video, I'm not sure what I'll title this video, but it will be focused on the importance of knowing the language of, of the country that you're traveling in this case obviously Spanish, and it's also about how speaking Spanish can save you in a lot of different instances when you're traveling through Latin America and other Spanish speaking countries. So guys, I was almost arrested, okay, and I'm gonna go through 4 stories here, but in this first story, guys, in Peru, I didn't say that yet, but in Peru, in Lima, Peru, I was almost arrested. ¿Por qué? Why? Okay, I'll tell you. So I went to Peru with my brother, my younger brother. And Marlon, if you're watching this, I apologize to you again. I got unnecessarily emotional, I apologize. But I don't know how this happened, but my brother was able to make it through the busiest airport in the United States, the Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. He was able to get his bag, his carry-on bag, through the security clearance with scissors, like hair scissors, and with a blade to shave with, but to line your hair with. Okay, so he was able to get through, somehow he was able to get through US Customs and allow those things to get transported to Peru through the flight. Again, in retrospect, I can see why he thought this was an innocent thing. They're literally just personal care, self-care items, so I get it. But long story short, obviously you all know that those things are not allowed on carry-on bags. Okay, and so long story short, we got to Lima. These items made it through the security when we got to Lima, okay? What happened though is after a few days in Lima, we went to Cusco, Peru, and obviously that takes another flight. You have to take a flight to get to Cusco. And so when we got to the airport to get to Lima, and my brother put his bag through the security thing, there was a big fiasco. Like, all of the customs agents started freaking out. So let me add here that now that we're heading to Cusco, our bags have to get checked again. Well, when our bags get checked again, this is when the agents find my brother's hair clippers and his blade, but it's a blade to line your hair up and cut your facial hair. Now, let me give you the context first. And the story is kind of random. I went ahead of my brother to take my shoes off and walk through the security and get checked. So I'm at the other side of the security line, pretty much, past the metal detectors, past everything, putting my shoes on, putting my belt on, getting everything, making sure that I have everything. So I'm not even paying attention to what's going on back there. But you can feel energy change, and I feel like I could feel a lot of energy in the area. I look back and I see like 3 airport agents looking at my brother aggressively, like ready to grab him, ready to pull him. He's trying to explain himself, but my brother does not speak Spanish at all. Okay, so they're like telling him you have a weapon. They're screaming at him almost, and he's freaking out. Not literally, my brother's a chill guy, but he's like, what in the world is going on? Okay, so I go over there, and as soon as I go over there, the agents get aggressive with me as well. Like, no, what are you doing? Why are you coming back this way? And so long story short, they threatened in Spanish to arrest me and arrest my brother until they gave me a few seconds. They were so hysterical, but they gave us a few seconds, or gave me a few seconds, to tell them like, hey, this was a sheer accident. We're from the United States, all in Spanish, from the United States, and somehow this got through the airport there. Like, I had to explain the logic behind what they were about to do, by arresting us. I was telling them, hey, how did this personal care item get through customs in the United States, and also get through customs in Lima the first time when we got here, and we got off the plane and went through, we spent our time in Lima. We were able to get through the airport then, but then now this is an issue. I told them all this in Spanish, and I was like, guys, this was an honest mistake. He didn't know what he's doing. Take the items, take them. We don't need them. We're not trying to be a threat here. Take them. And eventually, because of my ability to speak their language and to articulate myself well in their language using logic, I was able to avoid getting arrested by customs agents in Peru, and my brother was as well. So that's the first story. That was a crazy thing that happened, so much so that I got out of character and started not screaming at my brother, but getting on to him like, why would you do that? That was stupid, da-da-da. And again, Marlon, I apologize, that was my fault. It was an honest mistake. But because that was his first, I think, international trip as an adult. We traveled before as a kid, it doesn't matter. But that's the first thing. So imagine you all in that situation if you don't speak Spanish, or if you've not developed the ability to speak Spanish and you're dealing with some rogue customs agents that are just ready to find an issue, and they were justified, they found a weapon, but are ready for some action. You could have been in a holding cell for simply not speaking the language and not being able to articulate yourself. So that is the first story that I wanted to tell you all. We were almost arrested in Lima, Peru, and luckily I spoke Spanish and we were able to get out of that situation with a handshake. We were able to shake those guys' hands, and they ended up looking at it, sending us off with a smile because they could see that it was an honest mistake. So the second story that I wanted to tell you all, and again, the whole theme of this video is the importance of speaking a foreign language in a foreign land or a country where you're visiting, because it not only saves you in terms of just sheer safety, but it saves you money as well. And so this next story is a smaller one. Also involves me being in Peru. When my brother and I were in Peru, we went to Arequipa, Peru to visit my friend Sophia. And when I wasn't with Sophia, because there were times where I wasn't with her, I would take cabs, okay? And I distinctly remember one day my brother and I took a cab, and I wanted to try something because luckily in Peru, they don't have a culture of like hustling you, meaning, at least in my experience, since I spoke Spanish, I didn't get a lot of people increasing the prices by a whole lot. I so much so noticed this, that even if I paid them with too much money, they would always say, ah, mijo, me pagaste demasiado, like you paid me too much, okay? So Peru's chill with this, but I did have a taxi driver, a Venezuelan guy that was my taxi driver one day, and I remember, so I wanted to see how he would respond if I did not speak Spanish. Pretty much if he just knew that there's this gringo coming into my car, what would the response be? And so this day, I got into this cab. I did not tell the cab driver that, like, I didn't speak to him in Spanish. I spoke to him with a translator if I spoke anything to him, and when I didn't speak with a translator, I used basic English with him, and he understood basic English. He called someone on the phone while I was in the taxi with him, and I heard him say, voy a aumentar este precio para este gringo. If you don't speak Spanish well, this guy said, I'm gonna increase the price on this gringo, okay, on this American. Long story short, that little small story lets you know what happens when you don't speak the language. You need to speak the language, not only for your safety, but for your wallet, tu cartera, okay? So that's the second story, and that's the one, those two involve me being in Peru. I do have, I think, one story. Yeah, I have one more story with me being in Colombia. And again, the emphasis here is on why you need to speak Spanish in other countries. When you're visiting them, you need to understand the language. So this final story, it involves me being in Colombia. As you all know, I went to Colombia and I was guided by my tutor and friend Sharon when I went to Bogota. Then when I went to Cartagena, because Sharon has family in Cartagena, her uncle picked me up and showed me around the city. He showed me the super rich areas, and he showed me the poorest of the poor areas, like areas that made me realize that poverty, yes, does exist in the United States, but not, it's a different scale in some other places. Long story short though, Sharon's uncle felt comfortable taking me those places. He told me this because I speak a little bit of Spanish. He told me at the time. So what he decided to do is, instead of us eating at a super fancy place in the mall or going to some super fancy touristic restaurant where they're going to increase the prices on us, he said, let's go to this market. And those of you that have been to Cartagena, you know that there's a market called Basurto, okay? And everybody goes there. A lot of, like, I don't consider it to be like some cool little in the cut place that nobody knows about. It's a very local place, like a very humble local place, but I've seen a lot of tourists visit there, okay? Doesn't mean, okay, I'm gonna leave it there. So what Sharon's uncle told me is, like, he was like, listen, all in Spanish, because he doesn't speak English. He told me when we were in the cab coming from uno de los barrios, one of the barrios, he was like, listen, when we get to Basurto, no digas nada. He's like, when we get to Basurto, don't say anything. When we get to that market, don't say a word. And I was like, why? ¿Por qué? Well, once they realize you're a gringo, the price will go up. Number one, I don't want the price to go up for you. Number two, I don't want the price to go up for me. And in Cartagena, because they're so used to tourists, the price is gonna go up a lot. It's not gonna be a little hustle that's like kind of understandable. No, they're gonna almost triple, maybe quadruple the price. So just be quiet when we get there, and I've got you. Pretty much is what he said. I'm like, uh-oh. All right, let's do it. So we get out of the car, get out of the cab, we're walking up. Luckily in Cartagena, I can kind of blend in because of my physical characteristics. So we travel, walk through the market. He shows me the area around the market, and we get in, and I'm in the back of my mind remembering, don't say a word, okay? We get in, Sharon's uncle negotiates finds us a little area in the market. He starts to speak with one of the ladies that's cooking that has a small stand there. And she starts asking him, what do you all want, We order. He orders for me, because again, because of my accent. But the lady, la vendedora, quiero hablar en español. La vendedora me dijo, she told me, she started asking me, she was like, ¿qué quieres tomar? ¿Qué quieres tomar? Okay. Now, because I had remembered my assignment, what was my assignment? Don't say anything, especially not in English. But because I remembered my assignment, I was concerned, like, what do I do here? But my instincts told me, just respond to her very quickly and do your best at imitating their accent in Cartagena. Why is that beneficial? Well, it's beneficial for two reasons. One, it lets her know that I understand her, so that could possibly allow me to still hide myself como si fuera colombiano, as if I was a Colombian, and I said it quickly so that she could not detect my accent, okay? And so something as simple as understanding what she was saying. I apologize for the wind. Something as simple, and let me pause this for 1 second. So something as simple as me understanding her accent saved me time. Sorry, I didn't say me time. It saved me money, and it allowed us to eat and have an authentic experience there in Basurto versus being treated like a foreigner, like a privileged foreigner, okay? And so again, that's just a small example. I have thousands of other examples that I could present to you all, and I'm actually going to, at the end of this video, highlight a crazy story that I unfortunately heard about a few days ago. My brother sent it to me, of 3 people in Mexico, 3 tourists in Mexico that died and in Mexico City as a result of carbon dioxide poisoning, I think, or monoxide poisoning, sorry. And not their deaths, I'm not saying we're preventable. I'm just saying you have to keep in mind that speaking a language in another country is very important. It's not something that's like, well, you can get away with not doing it. Sure, you could, but it only increases your risk of not just crime or violence. It increases your risk of being taken advantage of financially, getting lost. It's just, there's so many factors that could go wrong when you don't speak the language, especially Spanish in Latin American countries. And so I'm gonna put some information there at the end of the video about that. But again, I'm not trying to say this is negative. On a positive note, I don't like to focus on the negative in life in general. On a positive note, some of the things that you're missing, as I've always said, by not speaking Spanish in Spanish-speaking countries, are those personal connections that you could build, those casual conversations that you could have, those people that you could meet by speaking the language. You all don't need me to sell you on speaking Spanish. Obviously, you would not be looking at me or watching this video if you did not have a desire to learn Spanish, but I just wanted to reinforce that with a few personal stories. I view this video as kind of like a story time video. So if you all have any personal stories of how speaking Spanish has impacted you in your travels, or even here in the United States or whatever country you're from, please leave those below in the comments. But again, it is super important that you speak Spanish or understand Spanish when you travel in Latin America. Es muy importante que entiendas el español cuando viajas. La verdad, chicos, o sea, es muy importante. Thank you for viewing the video. Gracias por ver. Estoy traduciendo. Nunca digo eso. I never say that. But thank you for watching the video. And again, if you have any comments, questions, and if you actually enjoy this kind of video, just let me know. I can do more like this because I do have a lot of stories that I could tell about some personal things. So yeah, appreciate it, guys. Ciao pues.